Did you know a dictator funded a Hollywood epic? ISIS used it for propaganda, and the director's own barber shaved the actor's head? From luxury desert camps with discotheques to a catastrophic $34 million loss, Lion of the Desert, 1980, has one of the most bizarre backstories in cinema history. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about Lion of the Desert. Fact 1. Gaddafi's $35 million gamble. When Lion of the Desert hit theaters in 1981, it carried one of the strangest financing stories in Hollywood history, and it was entirely bankrolled by Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi with a staggering budget of $35 million. To put that in perspective, adjusted for inflation, that's roughly $148 million in today's money, making it one of the most expensive films of its era. Gaddafi saw the film as a way to celebrate Libyan nationalism and honor Omar Mukhtar, the resistance hero who fought against Italian colonization in the 1920s and 30s, and the dictator spared no expense in bringing this epic story to the screen. Director Mustafa Akkad, a Syrian-American filmmaker, secured this massive investment after his previous film about the Prophet Muhammad had been partially funded by Libya as well. The production was lavish in every way, with thousands of extras, authentic military equipment, elaborate battle scenes, and a 7-month shoot in the harsh Libyan desert that required building entire village sets hundreds of miles from civilization. But despite all this investment and ambition, the film became one of the most catastrophic financial disasters in cinema history. When the dust settled, Lion of the Desert had earned only between $1 million and $1.5 million at the box office worldwide, meaning it lost approximately $33 to $34 million. The reasons for this epic failure were complex, including the film's controversial Gaddafi connection, which led to negative publicity in Western markets, its release during a period when other big-budget epics were also bombing, and the fact that most American audiences had little interest in or knowledge about Libyan colonial history. It remains notorious in the film industry as one of the biggest money-losing productions ever made. Fact 2. Banned in Italy for 27 years. Lion of the Desert faced an unusual fate in the very country it depicted, as Italy officially banned the film in 1982, just 1 year after its release, and the ban lasted for 27 years. Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti personally intervened to stop the film from being shown in Italian theaters, declaring that it was damaging to the honor of the Italian army because of its graphic portrayal of the brutal tactics used by Italian forces during their colonization of Libya. The film showed concentration camps where tens of thousands of Libyan civilians were imprisoned, the use of tanks and aircraft against poorly armed resistance fighters, the destruction of villages, and the hanging of prisoners, all of which were historically accurate but uncomfortable truths that many Italians preferred not to confront. The Italian government maintained that the film was defamatory and insisted it could not be screened publicly, and this prohibition was enforced throughout the 1980s, with the last documented intervention happening on April 7, 1987, in the city of Trento. After that incident, members of parliament from the Democrazia Proletaria Party even asked that the film be shown at the Chamber of Deputies to spark debate, but the request was denied. The ban finally lifted in a rather ironic and politically charged moment in 2009 when Italian television network Sky Italy broadcast Lion of the Desert for the first time on June 11th during an official state visit by Muammar Gaddafi himself, the very dictator who had financed the film nearly 3 decades earlier. This peculiar timing suggested that political relationships had shifted enough to allow Italians to finally see a film that had been kept from them for almost an entire generation, though many citizens remained largely unaware of the historical events it portrayed. Fact 3. The Halloween producer made it. One of the most unexpected aspects of Lion of the Desert is that its director and producer, Mustafa Akkad, was simultaneously the driving force behind one of horror cinema's most successful franchises, as he produced the entire original Halloween series and was the only person credited in all 8 films before his death. This created one of the strangest career combinations in Hollywood history. with Akkad splitting his professional life between epic historical dramas about Islamic heroes and slasher films featuring masked killer Michael Myers. Akkad had directed his first passion project, The Message about the Prophet Muhammad, in 1976, and was planning his second epic about Libyan resistance fighter Omar Mukhtar when director John Carpenter approached him in 1978 with a low-budget horror script called Halloween. Akkad decided to produce it while Carpenter directed, and the film became a massive commercial success that spawned sequel after sequel throughout the 1980s and 90s. Between directing Lion of the Desert in 1980 and 1981, Akkad was already deeply involved in producing Halloween sequels, and he continued this pattern for decades, using the steady income from the horror franchise to fund his dreams of making more films about Arab and Islamic history. He remained committed to both worlds, never abandoning either the Halloween series or his goal of producing meaningful historical epics, and he spent over a decade trying to secure funding for a film about Saladin and the Crusades that unfortunately never came to fruition. Akkad once explained that he saw no contradiction between these two very different types of filmmaking, as both required the same dedication to storytelling and production quality. And he believed that his work on Halloween gave him the financial freedom and industry credibility to pursue the historical projects that were closest to his heart. Fact 4. Mussolini's actual barber was hired. The production team's commitment to historical accuracy reached an almost absurd level when they tracked down and hired the actual barber who had once shaved the real Benito Mussolini's head to perform the same service for actor Rod Steiger, who was playing the Italian dictator in the film. This bizarre attention to detail meant that decades after Mussolini's death in 1945, the same person who had groomed the fascist leader during his reign was brought out of retirement or located wherever he was living to recreate his old routine on a movie set in the late 1970s. The decision reflected the filmmaker's dedication to authenticity in every aspect of the production, no matter how small or seemingly unnecessary. And it created a strange historical link between the actor and the real person he was portraying. Steiger only appeared in 2 scenes in the film as Mussolini, strutting around his offices in Rome and barking orders at his generals about the ongoing problems in Libya. But the production wanted every detail to be perfect, including the exact way his head was shaved to match the dictator's distinctive bald appearance. This wasn't the only example of the production going to extreme lengths for accuracy, as they also used historically correct Italian military uniforms, authentic weaponry, and even incorporated real black and white newsreel footage of the actual Mussolini into the film to establish historical context. The choice to hire Mussolini's former barber represents the kind of obsessive detail work that characterized the entire production, where massive amounts of money and effort were spent on elements that most viewers would never notice or appreciate, but which the filmmakers believed were essential to creating a truthful portrayal of this dark chapter in Italian and Libyan history. Fact 5. 5,000 real soldiers as extras. The Gaddafi regime provided the production with an extraordinary resource that most filmmakers could only dream of, as they loaned 5,000 actual Libyan military personnel to serve as extras in the film's massive battle sequences, playing both the Bedouin resistance fighters and the Italian colonial soldiers. This arrangement gave Lion of the Desert one of the largest casts of real military extras in cinema history, and it meant that the film's epic battle scenes featured thousands of trained soldiers who knew how to handle weapons, move in formation, and execute complex maneuvers rather than untrained civilians trying to pretend to be warriors. Some sources suggest the number may have been even higher, with reports of up to 10,000 military extras being made available at various points during the 7-month production. The Libyan government's complete cooperation extended beyond just providing personnel, as they also supplied authentic military equipment, vehicles, and logistical support that would have been impossible for a private production to secure on its own. This massive military presence allowed director Mustafa Akkad to stage truly spectacular battle scenes with thousands of people charging across the desert, engaging in hand-to-hand combat, and recreating the historical clashes between Italian forces and Libyan resistance fighters with unprecedented scale and realism. The scenes showing Italian troops attacking villages, the desperate defense by Bedouin warriors, and the sweeping panoramas of armies stretched across the desert landscape all benefited from having actual soldiers who could follow orders and coordinate their movements in ways that regular extras simply couldn't match. This level of military involvement was only possible because Gaddafi saw the film as a propaganda tool to celebrate Libyan nationalism and honor Omar Mukhtar, so he was willing to commit enormous state resources to ensure the production had everything it needed to tell this story on the grandest possible scale. Fact 6. Luxury desert camp with a disco. While filming in the harsh and remote Libyan desert, the cast and crew didn't have to rough it in basic tents like you might expect, because the production built elaborate living camps that resembled luxury resorts more than typical film location accommodations. These specially constructed camps featured full air conditioning to combat the brutal desert heat, a proper restaurant serving meals rather than basic catering, a library stocked with books for downtime reading, billiards tables and ping pong tables for recreation, and even a discotheque where the crew could dance and unwind after long days of shooting in temperatures that could reach well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The facilities also included a swimming pool where actors and crew members could cool off between takes, and a movie theater where they could watch films during their evenings in the middle of nowhere, creating an almost surreal contrast between the primitive desert warfare they were filming during the day and the modern comforts they enjoyed at night. The sound recordist who worked on the production later recalled that producer and director Mustafa Akkad provided fantastic facilities that had a strong influence on the quality of the final film, because keeping the cast and crew comfortable and entertained during the grueling 7-month shoot from March to October of 1979 helped maintain morale and energy levels. These camps were built in locations that were hundreds of miles from the nearest city, sometimes 500 miles from Benghazi, which meant that creating this self-contained community with all its amenities required enormous logistical planning and expense, but it was considered necessary to attract top international talent and keep them happy while working in such an isolated and challenging environment. The luxurious setup demonstrated just how seriously Gaddafi and Akkad took this production, sparing no expense to ensure that everyone involved could focus on making the best film possible. Fact 7. ISIS used it for propaganda. In January of 2016, the film experienced one of the most disturbing and unexpected revivals in cinema history when ISIS militants used footage from Lion of the Desert in their propaganda videos to threaten attacks against Italy and other European countries. The terrorist organization specifically selected scenes featuring Oliver Reed's character, the brutal Italian general Rodolfo Graziani, including a sequence where Libyan resistance fighters successfully ambush an Italian military convoy while the horrified general looks on in shock and disbelief. ISIS narrators overlaid these dramatic battle scenes with their own threatening messages, claiming that their fighters would continue the legacy of anti-colonial resistance shown in the film and warning that their banner would eventually fly over Rome, the capital of Italy. The propaganda video also included other scenes from the movie while extending threats to France and Spain, attempting to draw historical parallels between the Italian colonization of Libya in the 1920s and 30s and modern Western involvement in the Middle East and North Africa. The irony of this appropriation was almost overwhelming, considering that the film had been financed by Muammar Gaddafi, who spent much of his later rule brutally suppressing Islamist groups in Libya, and the film's director Mustafa Akkad had been killed by an al-Qaeda terrorist attack in Jordan in 2005, carried out by the very organization that would eventually evolve into ISIS. This bizarre chapter in the film's history highlighted how historical epics about resistance and colonial struggle can be reinterpreted and misused decades after their creation in ways their makers never intended or could have predicted. And it added yet another strange layer to a production that had already been defined by controversy, political complications, and unexpected twists throughout its entire existence. Fact 8. The director was killed by terrorists. Mustafa Akkad's life came to a tragic end on November 9, 2005, when he and his 34-year-old daughter, Rima Akkad Monla, were killed in a coordinated terrorist attack in Amman, Jordan, that targeted 3 hotels simultaneously and left at least 60 people dead. The filmmaker and his daughter were in the lobby of the Grand Hyatt Hotel, where they had gathered to attend a wedding celebration, when a suicide bomber detonated explosives that killed Rima instantly and left Akkad with severe injuries that proved fatal 2 days later when he died in a portrayed hospital on November 11th. The attack was claimed by Al-Qaeda's Iraq branch, the same terrorist organization that would eventually evolve into ISIS, creating a deeply tragic irony given that this successor group would later use footage from Akkad's film Lion of the Desert for their own propaganda purposes more than a decade after his death. Akkad was 75 years old at the time and had spent his final years trying to secure funding for another historical epic about Saladin and the Crusades, a project he hoped would provide a balanced portrayal of Islamic history and counter negative stereotypes, but he never lived to see it realized. His death was mourned throughout the film industry and the Arab world, with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad awarding him Syria's most prestigious civil medal for his Arab nationalist contributions, and the 2007 remake of Halloween was dedicated to his memory. Akkad was buried in his hometown of Aleppo, Syria, and streets were renamed after him in both Aleppo and Beirut as tributes to his legacy as a filmmaker who spent his career trying to bridge cultural divides and tell stories that celebrated Arab and Islamic history, while also producing some of Hollywood's most successful horror films. Fact 9. Oliver Reed's Usual Antics. The production brought together 2 very different leading men with contrasting approaches to their work, and according to Lionel Strutt, the sound recordist who spent months with the cast and crew in the Libyan desert, the contrast between them was striking and sometimes challenging for the production team. Strutt later wrote about his first-hand experience working on the film, noting that Anthony Quinn was totally dedicated to his role as Omar Mukhtar and maintained a serious, professional demeanor throughout the grueling 7-month shoot from March to October of 1979. However, when it came to Oliver Reed, who played the ruthless Italian general Rodolfo Graziani, Strutt diplomatically acknowledged that while Reed was able to put up a good performance on camera, he did give us a few problems with his usual antics during production. The sound recordist never elaborated on exactly what these antics involved, leaving the specific details to the imagination, but anyone familiar with Oliver Reed's notorious reputation in Hollywood would have a pretty good idea of what kinds of behavior he was referring to. Reed was legendary throughout the film industry for his heavy drinking, wild partying, and unpredictable behavior on set. And these tendencies apparently didn't disappear just because he was working in the middle of the desert far from civilization. Despite whatever off-camera difficulties Reed may have caused, Strutt emphasized that the rest of the cast were brilliant, and the result was impressive, suggesting that Reed's professionalism when the cameras were rolling ultimately outweighed whatever problems he created during downtime. The fact that the production managed to complete such an ambitious film under challenging conditions while dealing with Reed's behavior speaks to the determination of director Mustafa Akkad and the rest of the crew to deliver a quality historical epic. Fact 10. Oscar winner, cinematographer, returned director Mustafa Akkad assembled a world-class crew for Lion of the Desert, and one of his most important hires was cinematographer Jack Hildyard, who had won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography for The Bridge on the River Kwai back in 1957, more than 2 decades before taking on this project. Hildyard was a legendary figure in British cinema who had been working in the film industry since 1932 and had collaborated multiple times with acclaimed director David Lean on epic productions that showcased stunning landscape photography and ambitious scope. By bringing Hildyard on board, Akkad was essentially reuniting the cinematographer with the same type of sweeping desert vistas and large-scale battle sequences that had defined some of his greatest work, giving Lion of the Desert a visual pedigree that connected it to classics of the epic film genre. The production also hired composer Maurice Jarre to create the musical score, and Jarre had worked with Hildyard before on several David Lean films, meaning the two craftsmen were familiar with each other's working styles and could collaborate effectively to combine stunning visuals with powerful music. Jara was famous for his work on Lawrence of Arabia and other epic films, so having both him and Hildyard on the same project created inevitable comparisons to those earlier classics and raised expectations for the visual and auditory quality of Lion of the Desert. Hildyard's cinematography captured the harsh beauty of the Libyan desert with wide shots that emphasized the vast, unforgiving landscape where this historical struggle took place, while also filming intimate close-ups during dramatic moments that revealed the emotions and determination of the characters. The collaboration between Hildyard and Jara, along with the use of the London Symphony Orchestra to perform the score, demonstrated Akkad's commitment to creating a film that could stand alongside the greatest historical epics ever made. Fact 11. Mexican-Irish actor. As Arab hero, one of the most surprising aspects of Lion of the Desert is that the lead role of Omar Mukhtar, a revered Arab hero in Libya and throughout the Islamic world, was played by Anthony Quinn, an actor who was born in Mexico to a Mexican mother and an Irish father and had no Arab ancestry whatsoever. Quinn had built his career playing an incredibly diverse range of ethnic characters, from Greeks to Italians to Native Americans, and his ability to convincingly portray people from many different cultures made him a natural choice for the role, despite his actual heritage. Critics and historians later noted the irony that this film about Libyan resistance and Arab nationalism cast American and European actors in almost every major Libyan-speaking role, with the distinguished British actor John Gielgud playing Sharif El-Ghariani, a Bedouin elder and former friend of Mukhtar, who eventually collaborates with the Italians. This casting approach was particularly surprising given that the film was funded by Muammar Gaddafi specifically to celebrate Libyan history and honor a national hero, yet the production chose international star power over authentic Arab representation in the lead roles. Quinn had previously worked with director Mustafa Akkad on The Message in 1976, where he played Hamza, the uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, so there was already an established working relationship and trust between the actor and director. Quinn's performance was widely praised for its dignity and emotional depth, and he brought genuine commitment to portraying Mukhtar as a wise, principled leader who chose resistance over surrender despite impossible odds. The choice to prioritize established Hollywood talent over ethnic authenticity reflected the reality of international film production in the late 1970s, where big-name actors were considered essential for attracting financing and audiences, even when making a film intended primarily to speak to Arab viewers about their own history. Fact 12. Filmed between two epic flops. Lion of the Desert had the misfortune of being released during what turned out to be one of the most catastrophic periods for big-budget Hollywood productions in cinema history, as the early 1980s saw an unprecedented wave of expensive films that lost staggering amounts of money at the box office. The film found itself in unfortunate company alongside Heaven's Gate, directed by Michael Cimino and released in 1980, which became so notorious for its financial losses that it essentially destroyed United Artists as an independent studio. That same year also saw the release of Raise the Titanic, another hugely expensive production that sank at the box office and prompted its producer to joke that it would have been cheaper to actually lower the Atlantic Ocean than to make the film. The bad luck continued into 1981 when Lion of the Desert was joined by Inchon, a Korean War epic financed by the Unification Church that became one of the biggest financial disasters ever recorded, and Pennies from Heaven, an ambitious musical drama starring Steve Martin that audiences simply refused to see despite critical acclaim. This cluster of expensive failures created a period of crisis in Hollywood where studios became extremely reluctant to greenlight big-budget historical epics or ambitious projects that couldn't guarantee immediate returns, fundamentally changing how the industry approached filmmaking for years to come. Lion of the Desert was specifically mentioned in industry discussions as part of this group of notorious money losers, with its $33 to $34 million loss, putting it in the same conversation as these other cautionary tales about the dangers of excessive spending and overconfidence in the appeal of historical subject matter to mainstream audiences who were increasingly drawn to blockbusters like Star Wars and more contemporary entertainment. Fact 13. Never shown on UK television, Lion of the Desert has an unusual distinction in British broadcasting history, as the film has reportedly never been shown on UK terrestrial or satellite television, despite featuring two of Britain's most celebrated actors, Oliver Reed and John Gielgud, in major roles alongside other British cast members. This absence is particularly striking given that British television networks routinely air classic films from the 1970s and 80s, especially those with prominent British stars, and the film's epic scope and historical subject matter would seem to make it perfect for weekend afternoon or late-night programming slots. A viewer who discovered a video copy of the film in 1995 expressed surprise that they had never heard of it, despite its impressive cast, and noted that it was the only copy they had ever come across in UK shops, suggesting that the film had virtually no presence in the British home video market either. The most likely explanation for this conspicuous absence is that British broadcasters and distributors were uncomfortable with the film's association with Muammar Gaddafi, who was subject to international embargoes and considered a pariah by Western governments for much of the 1980s, 90s, and early 2000s due to Libya's involvement in terrorism and various international conflicts. The Gaddafi connection made the film politically toxic in a way that transcended its actual content or artistic merits. And British media companies apparently decided that the risk of controversy or negative publicity simply wasn't worth whatever modest ratings or revenue the film might generate. This unofficial blacklisting meant that British audiences were denied the opportunity to see a major historical epic featuring some of their country's finest acting talent, creating a strange gap in the nation's film culture that persists to this day. Fact 14. Map anachronism in the film. Despite the production's obsessive attention to historical accuracy in so many areas, the film contains at least one notable error that sharp-eyed viewers familiar with African colonial history have spotted over the years. During a scene where Colonel Diodayese meets with General Graziani and Prince Amadeo to discuss the possibility of starting peace talks with the Libyan resistance, a map is visible on the wall behind them depicting the Horn of Africa region. And this map shows a unified Italian East Africa with no borders between Ethiopia and the adjoining Italian colonies of Eritrea and Italian Somaliland. The problem with this map is that it represents a political situation that did not exist until 1936, when Italy successfully invaded and conquered Ethiopia under Mussolini's orders, and then merged all three territories into a single administrative unit called Italian East Africa. Since the film takes place from 1929 to 1931, this map is anachronistic by about 5 years, showing a future geopolitical reality that had not yet come to pass at the time when this meeting would have occurred. During the actual period depicted in the film, Ethiopia was still an independent nation under Emperor Haile Selassie, and the Italian colonies of Eritrea and Italian Somaliland were separate territories with clear borders that distinguished them from their sovereign neighbor. This kind of mistake is particularly ironic given how much effort and money the production spent on getting other historical details correct, from military uniforms and weaponry to the exact way Mussolini's head was shaved. Yet somehow, an inaccurate map made it into the final cut of the film. The error suggests that while the filmmakers were meticulous about visible details that audiences would immediately notice, background elements like maps received less scrutiny during production and post-production review, allowing this historical inaccuracy to slip through undetected. Fact 15. Shot at the actual locations. Lion of the Desert achieved a level of geographical authenticity that few historical films can claim, as the production was shot on location in the actual eastern Libyan territories where Omar Mukhtar conducted his real guerrilla campaign against Italian colonial forces from 1911 to 1931. The filmmakers specifically chose to work on the Green Mountain, known locally as Jebel Akhdar, which is a highland region in northeastern Libya that provided Mukhtar and his resistance fighters with a natural fortress where they could hide in the labyrinth of caves and rocky terrain that Italian troops found nearly impossible to navigate effectively. This mountainous area was central to Mukhtar's military strategy, as the elevated position and complex geography allowed his smaller, less equipped forces to launch surprise attacks and then disappear into hiding before the Italians could mount an effective counterattack. The production also filmed extensively in the flat desert expanses that surround the Green Mountain, capturing the vast, harsh landscape where many of the film's large-scale battle scenes took place and where the historical conflict actually unfolded. By choosing to shoot in these authentic locations, rather than finding similar-looking terrain elsewhere or relying on studio sets and backlots, the filmmakers added a layer of historical legitimacy and visual power to the film that would have been impossible to replicate anywhere else. The decision to film on location was made easier by Gaddafi's complete support and the Libyan government's willingness to provide access to these remote areas, along with the massive logistical support needed to transport cast, crew, and equipment to places that were sometimes hundreds of miles from the nearest cities. This commitment to authenticity meant that the spectacular desert vistas and dramatic mountain landscapes viewers see on screen are the same ones that witness the actual historical events being portrayed.